This is the Glenn Beck Program. Al Gore made a movie called The Inconvenient Truth. And I remember when Stu went, when I went, Stu was holding his breath. He had already seen it, and he knew, oh, man, if Glenn gets his teeth into this one, and he's swayed by the, whatever. And I walked out of it, and I went, that was a powerful movie. And I called you from the lobby of the movie theater, and I said, give me all the other side. I want to hear all the other side. And we debunked it piece by piece, and it led to a book, an inconvenient book, which had inconvenient facts, but that was only part of that book. There's a new book out now called Inconvenient Facts, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know. And the author, Gregory Wrightstone, is with us now to go over some of it. How are you, Greg?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Thank you much.
You bet. Okay, so we were just talking off air about forest fires. Yeah. Let's start there on what climate change is doing to the state of California.
Yeah, it's just awful.
Yeah.
Did you know that the number of forest fires actually are declining in California? According to CAL FIRE, that's the source of all fire-related data in California. According to CAL FIRE, the number of fires have declined by almost 50% over the last 30 years. Now, granted, the area burned has increased, but the area burned has nothing to do with global warming or climate change, rather poor forest management.
No, Greg, it has everything to do with there's no water in California, and it's getting hotter in California.
Well, the dirty little secret is with fires, there's three things we need for wildfires and forest fires. You need an ignition source, you need fuel, and then you need arid conditions. And you know what we're doing? Man's actions are actually contributing negatively to all three, but it's not because of global warming. The Sierra Nevada Conservancy says there are 4 to 5 times as many trees per acre today than what a normal healthy forest should have. 4 to 5 times too much. And what that means is, of course, more fuel. That's easily understood. What it also means is the second largest source of aridity of loss of soil moisture is the moisture that's sucked out of the ground and the soil
from the trees.
So now you got 4 to 5 times too many trees competing for that same scarce soil moisture. When you think about it now, it's leading to the aridity, and there's estimated a 1,000% increase in the last 40 years of people living in fire-prone areas. So now we get ignition sources up, we got more fuel, and we got more aridity, and it's not due to climate change or global warming.
Of course, that causes a lot more damage when the fire actually happens, too. You've got a lot more homes to burn.
Intensity, area burned in California has increased. So necessarily, each fire is about twice as big as it used to be. But the good news, Glenn, that goes unreported is that worldwide fires, the number of fires is declining, and it's the experts.
Well, but it's probably those fires are put out because of all the hurricanes that are happening.
Yeah, but that would be area burned. We're talking they're talking about number of fires. Once that fire ignites, they count it. So even if it's put out, it's counted. So what we find is soil moisture across the world is increasing. And the fire experts tell us it's because of climate change, increasing precipitation. And the climate alarmists will say, well, that'll lead to flooding, and it might in some cases. But the good news is we're seeing increased soil moisture around the world. And then because of increased CO2 fertilization effect, plants need less water.
I mean, okay, all right. But, you're such a denier. Let's go to the real facts. Let me take you to the real facts. The polar ice caps are melting. The polar bears are having to move, down into civilization because they have no ice. They have no more ice. And at the same time, you see how hot it's getting, and at the same time, how cold it's getting all around the world. Answer that one.
Yeah, well, sea ice is diminishing in the northern polar ice cap. Just as an aside, before we go any farther, you may not realize you could melt the entire northern polar ice cap, and it would have scarcely any effect on sea level. And the reason is it's ice that's floating on the ocean. So as it melts, it displaces. So it's only land-based glaciers that cause sea level rise. But what we have, and in my new app, I've got a chart showing the decline of sea ice and then comparing it to the increase in population of polar bears. So as sea ice has been diminishing, polar bears are increasing. Now, granted, part of it's because we stopped doing trophy hunting, but certainly the loss of sea ice hasn't hurt them to any measurable extent. And the study related in the book, they compare bears in a high ice loss area along Russia to the areas of bears that didn't have much. And those bears where there was a lot of ice loss, man, they were fat and happy. They were much, much heavier, more successful than the bears where there was a lot of ice.
I would say, too, you also have an update on a stat that we talk about all the time when it comes to polar bears. I mean, back in the 60s, it was about 5,000 polar bears that existed. And we talk all the time, Glenn. We said this just the other day, that it's up to about 25,000. And that number had come from the mid-2000s-ish. So I honestly hadn't seen an update in quite some time. You have an update in the book.
Yeah, it's 2017. Susan Crockford's probably the top polar bear expert. And I communicated her. I wanted to get the best data. We published the book about a year ago. We've got a new app that's come out. We were back and forth. I said, what's the best data you have to date? And that's what's incorporated in the app. Confirmed what I have in the book there. And the average, now bear in mind, it's dangerous and pretty tough to measure polar bear populations because
they eat you.
Right.
Yes.
Apparently, people taste a lot like seals because we're on the polar bear menu.
Right.
And, her average, she estimates 28,500.
So it's increased since that because I remember the first time I heard 5,000 to 25,000. I thought it was impossible.
Yeah, bear in mind, there's like an error bar like this. So
Sure.
you might be off by a couple thousand because, again, it's pretty tough to
the bottom line is we haven't seen a significant decrease.
It's definitely been increasing. It's just how much. That's the question.
When it comes to the fires, let me back up a little bit to that. One of the things that people will say when it comes to these fires getting worse is we just have had so much drought. There's more drought now than there's ever been before, and that's causing all of these problems to get worse.
Yeah, again, what we're being told flies in the face of the science and the facts. I think at this point might be interesting for your viewers to find out that I didn't set out to write a book. I set out to seek the truth, and it was that search for the truth that led me to this. And that was one of the stunning things about drought and forest fires. When I found out that actually droughts were in a slight decline, and especially the big droughts were declining, I said, wow. And I said,
no one knows that.
No one knows that.
Yeah. Everyone
So
thinks
there
it's
might be
worse.
droughts here and there, but overall.
Right, exactly. Droughts have always been with us. They always will be. The good news is the most severe droughts are being exacerbated mainly by that increase in soil moisture we talked about before. And this increase in soil moisture alleviates those droughts. I've got a chart in the book and on my app showing the most intense and significant droughts of the 20th century. And if you look at those are the really bad ones. The
Dust Bowl.
The Dust Bowl, the Sahel droughts. There were a number, I think there were 28 that they recognized in the 20th century, but we find that most of those, almost all of them, were before 1960. So as CO2 has increased, as temperature increased, and yes, we're in a temperature increase, thankfully. We have been for the last 300 years.
You say thankfully, and you actually show that pretty well in the book.
Oh, yes.
When it comes to the amount of greenery we were able to grow, I mean, it's increased almost everywhere in the entire world.
Yeah, and also, it's fascinating if you look over human history. If we look over the last 4,500 years, each of the warming trends that we've seen, the Minoan, the Roman, the medieval warm period, each one of these correlated to a benefit of civilization. We see a great correlation between the rise and fall of temperature and the rise and fall of civilizations. If you were Emperor Glenn in a warm period, you had it good because you could feed your subjects. Food was bountiful. People had time to dream, to tinker, to invent. In the cold periods, just again, opposite of what we're being told, the cold periods were where bad things happened consistently. Famine, crop failure, pestilence, mass depopulation. Cold is very, very bad. And in the Little Ice Age, which was just recently, we started warming at the end of this late 17th century, and it's that beneficial warmth that we're recognizing today.
Yeah, but if it stays on this, worst case projections, we'll be as hot as the sun in 1,000 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem.
Exactly.
Is they take these projections and then say, worst case scenario. Well, that's not happened to the world before. And if you look back, how many hothouse and icehouse periods have there been?
Yeah, most of the Earth has been significantly, going back to the pre-Cambrian, have been significantly warmer than we are today by as much as 15 to 20 times, or degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
15 to 20 times hotter?
Significant. It's called hothouse events or icehouse events, which is what we're in now. During icehouse events, we have ice at both poles or one of the poles. During the hothouse, there's no ice on Earth. And
really?
But the key thing here is we look at carbon dioxide. It's in the past up until now is consistently temperature has caused carbon dioxide to change. In other words, when it warms, the oceans vent carbon dioxide, so carbon dioxide increases. Mm-hmm. During cold periods, it sucks up. Because I know it sounds counterintuitive, but if you put a liter of ginger ale in your refrigerator, right, you open it up and it goes, you put that out on your patio in August and open it up, and man, it's like a volcano. And what that's doing is spewing the carbon dioxide. And we have that same event happen with a warming ocean. So the temperature change precedes changes in CO2.
When did CO2 become bad? Because I remember being taught in school. Were you taught this, Stu?
Oh, yeah.
That it was the miracle of the circle of life is poison to man. Enough of that. You breathe out what you can no longer use, but the trees breathe it in, and they breathe out poison to them, if you will, just the air that we can breathe, the oxygen that we breathe, and it's this circle. Is that even taught anymore?
I don't know about that. I know you and I learned it.
Did you learn that?
I did learn it. Yep.
You've hit on an important point here, Glenn, is that they need to demonize carbon dioxide, and they need to demonize it terribly, because this drives all of these the environmental people, the keep it in the ground movement, the anti-fossil fuel, the divestment movement on college campuses. It's all driven by a demonization of carbon dioxide. They're saying that carbon dioxide is driving dangerous increases in temperatures, and that those dangerous increases in temperatures will necessarily lead to catastrophic events.
Right.
Well, what these predictions are, and they're based on failed climate models of what may happen 30, 50, or 80 years in the future. What I've done in the book and in the app is to say, well, what's actually happening today? And we've been warming for 300 years. We've been adding significant CO2 since the end of World War II. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't we recognize something bad happening by now? But yet, no, we see crops continue to increase. Not entirely due to it, but a significant contributor is warming temperatures, lengthening growing seasons, and increasing CO2, leading to CO2 fertilization. And we see these bad things that are predicted just ain't happening.
I mean, even the UN says the net increased CO2 levels until I think it's about 2080 is a net benefit for the globe. Which is it's a statement you'd never hear said. That doesn't mean they don't have negative consequences in some parts. This is, again, the UN saying this. But they say net for the globe, it's actually a benefit until about 2080.
Yeah. I don't think the UN's a good person to use, because they've got a history of failed predictions. But you're right. But even if they're saying it, and of course their Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is the UN climate alarmist organization. Yep. Things like there are things that they capture that they kind of say tucked away here and there that I've publicized here as an inconvenient fact. And so this,
Can you tell us about the app here before we leave?
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah, App Store, Google Play Store, search for Inconvenient Facts. It's awesome. It's powerful. It puts this information in the palm of your hands. It's well-sourced, well-referenced, and videos linked to each one of these.
That's great.
So this is something that you can have in your pocket at all times. So when you meet a climate alarmist, you go to the app, and it will help you with the charts and the graphs. Everything is sourced. Everything is triple checked to make sure that it's exactly right. And you have the argument. So you're not going, geez, I wish I heard that guy. I wish I would have listened or written it down. Or I did write it down and now I don't have the paper. It's there on your phone with Inconvenient app. Get the Inconvenient app. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, Glenn.
You bet. God bless.